In this video, we're going to be talking about the Nagant. No, not the Mosin Nagant, the Nagant, the model 1895. And it does share a name with the Mosin Nagant because it shares a designer/inventor. So the first thing about this is that this one is single action. Now, this one was available in single and double action and widely used in double action later on in its service life, but there were single action variants early on. Now, just as a refresher between single and double action, just remember what the trigger is doing, how many things it's doing. Is it doing one, a single action, or two, double actions? So in this one, being single action, the trigger will only fire it, so it will not do the preparation phase. Preparation phase being rotating the cylinder and setting the hammer. So now that that is done, the single action of the trigger comes into play. Now on a double action revolver, like this hilariously oversized Smith & Wesson 500, that trigger will do two things, the preparation phase and the firing phase. So when you're thinking about double versus single action, just think about the trigger, and that might be able to help you out. So next thing to talk about is the way that you load this thing. So normally on revolvers, you're probably used to seeing the cylinder swivel out to the side so that you can load it easily with a moon clip or a speed loader. On this one, since it is a product of its time, it has a loading gate mechanism. So this loading gate lever blocker will flip to the side and show one cylinder. I know you're seeing 1.75 cylinders here, but really only one at a time was going to be usable. So to load it, you would have to load each cylinder one at a time. So you would load it, move it, on and on and on until it was full. Now if you were counting, you will notice that that was actually 7 rounds because this holds one more than most 6-shooter revolvers. So since this is single action, we have to cock that hammer, and let's take out some barrels. I can't tell if I'm hitting them or not because they are delayed explosion. I think I hit that one because I don't think they explode unless they're already on fire. Okay. Whew. Must have been a good shot. Now I've not been keeping track, but I think I might be out. Nope, one more. Nope. Okay, so since we fired all 7, now we have to open that loading gate, and we have to use this ejector rod. So how this would actually function is that you would pull this out, rotate this block to the side, and then actually push that rod back to eject the round, which will look something like that. So it only does one at a time, so you'd eject it, you'd have to move that cylinder, eject it, move that cylinder, eject it, so on and so forth. Now you can see that this is extremely time consuming and tedious, so it is not the best way to do it if you do have all of the options, but back then they didn't have the option, so it was probably pretty sweet. You know, think about this versus like a muzzle loader, like a musket, where you'd have to jam around there, the wad, the powder, blah blah blah. It's a lot better than that. So I guess it's all relative. So once that is clear, you are ready to keep loading it. So a little bit of comparison, just historically, this is the Colt single action, which is somewhat similar in its function. Similarly has that loading gate. This one came 20 years earlier and actually does have this spring-loaded ejector rod, which you do not have to pull out every time because that spring just comes forward. So, you know, these countries weren't talking together, being the United States and Russia, or, you know, whatever Russia was at the time. So the technology wasn't going back and forth across the sea. So it's interesting to see how these kind of develop in a world without the internet, where ideas aren't just bounced around at the speed of light or an internet connection. So just talking about that round a little bit more, this is the 7.62 by 38 rimmed cartridge. And if you look at it, you'll probably say, Coda, that looks like a spent round. But if you look at it from the top, you will see the bullet sticking in there. And that is a product of how this thing works. It is a gas seal revolver. And before we talk about that, I want to talk about this sizing again. Now, I mentioned that 7.62 by 38 rimmed. Now, you'll remember, or might not remember, from my other video about the Mosin Nagant, which fires this round, the 7.62 by 54 rimmed. So those first numbers, meaning the diameter of the projectile, are the same. So theoretically, you could force one of these 7.62 by 54, you know, Mosin Nagant cartridges or Nagant bullets into there and load it with something crazy. But honestly, it probably wouldn't even make it down the barrel because of how heavy this thing is and how little charge that you would have in there because of how low pressure of a round this normally is. But they do have the same diameter cartridge, and most people say that that's because having a uniform cartridge makes things easier for manufacturing. But you know, knowing what I know about guns, I can't really imagine that that's very helpful. The only tools that would be similar in these, given that they're 7.62 diameter projectiles, is whatever you use to rifle the barrels. So that piece that you have to drive down there to do the rifling, which are the grooves in there to make the bullet spin. That plus maybe the different pieces you use to get that diameter. But really, I can't think of many other uses. Maybe I'm just oblivious to them. If you do know, let me know in the comments, and you know, I'll be more enlightened. But just seems like it's good on paper, but not on practice. So since I have them, let's load in some more. And why don't we do one of the target rounds? I've set this up beforehand, and they're pretty darn close. Oh no! Okay, now I've got very little time to load this thing. Oh no! Things are going out of control. Oh, I did not load that well. I clearly don't do well under pressure. Oh jeez, I'm just ejecting them. Oh boy. Whew, not ideal. So you can see someone who's not practiced with this style of loading is not going to succeed on it, as I did not. But I suppose someone who is adept with this could load it somewhat effectively. And I've lost all my stuff because I accidentally shot some of the barrels nearby. So the last thing I want to talk about with this thing is the fact that it is a gas seal revolver. Now, that may be completely foreign to you, and that's okay, because this is actually the only gas seal revolver that I'm aware of having this mechanism. I mean, gas seal is what makes this the way it is, and the thing, it'll become clear to you in a second. So this is how most revolvers look. There is a gap between the cylinder and the barrel. This one is a forcing cone, because what happens on this one is that when you ready the hammer, the cylinder will spin, and then it gets pushed up forward into this forcing cone. Take a quick look at that. And that is helpful because it stops gases from escaping in that gap and then, you know, being lost to just expansion outside the barrel. Those gases are now captured better and are able to be used to force the projectile out. It has the secondary advantage of making this thing suppressible. So normally in a revolver, this gap just kind of sits like that. It's really not as pronounced, but because most revolvers don't have that pushing mechanism of the cylinder, it is somewhat unavoidable. There has to be a gap there. Another problematic element to this gap is that if you have something like a Chiappa Rhino, remember that fires from the bottom cylinder, and you're holding it with a two-handed grip, you might accidentally put your finger somewhere that would get caught by that blast. So there are actually gases that just shoot out the side and can cause a little bit of a bite on your thumb if they're too close. So since most revolvers have this gap there, the suppressor doesn't work effectively because the suppressor will provide a larger area in front of the barrel for those gases to expand without coming out and causing that vibration. But on a standard revolver with that suppressor there, you're still going to have the gases escape there, cause that loud noise, and it's pretty much useless. But on this one, you can suppress it. So I had a suppressor somewhere. Must have gone flying with everything else. Just going to grab one here. I don't know what that is. Might be weird, but that's okay. So I'm going to throw it on there. Definitely not era specific, but that's okay. So I'm going to load this guy up now. And we can shoot quietly. And any more barrels? One over there. I think that was my last round. Nope. Can't keep track with this silly 7 capacity. So, there it is. One of the few the only one that I know of, suppressible revolvers. I'm going to do one more round here and hopefully keep my composure during these target shootings. Let's keep it with another 6-second time interval. Whew, okay, gotta mentally prepare. Let's go. Oh, I almost got that last one. Oh, wow. It was hard to keep track of with ejecting and rotating the cylinder. But like I said earlier, I suppose it's something that you could get used to if this was your primary sidearm or primary weapon. If you were a spy or something, maybe the fact that you had a suppressible revolver would have been pretty clutch. So thank you guys so much for watching and checking out the Nagant Model 1895 with me. Hope you had fun. Hope you learned something. God, it's hard to see the sights. It's actually impossible to see the sights with this suppressor, which is just, you know, something you gotta deal with suppressors. But anyways, like I said, thanks for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.